People attended the service at the small brick church for 19-year-old Laura Lagrateria.
Laura, along with 3 close friends, disappeared last Saturday night. They were going to spend the evening in New Haven. They apparently made it to this bar. 5 days later, police found their car in the river. A concrete barrier that might have prevented it from going over was dislodged. An investigation is now pending. As Laura's body was carried out, people openly wept. Reverend Robert Cronin described the deceased as vivacious and one who loved life.
Christy Stevens and Jill Sawyer, both 19 years old, will be buried tomorrow. The other victim, Michael Gallo, 20, will be buried on Monday.
As Shahab Sharifi reports, today the nightmare of every parent was embodied in reality for families in one community which began burying 4 young friends who went out for a night on the town and never returned.
There is a sense of numbness and disbelief. Residents in this quiet Connecticut town are trying to make sense of it all. Why, they ask, did 4 young people who had so much going for them have to die? And why did it have to end this way?
It's at such a young age, and they were such nice people, and that's, you know, there's people out there who aren't nice, you know, who don't care what they do. These people cared about each other and cared about other people, and that's the sad thing about it.
They had been classmates at East Lyme High School. They all graduated in 1987. 20-year-old Michael Gallo and his 3 close friends, Christy Stevens, Jill Sawyer, and Laura Lagrateria, all of whom were 19, had been missing since Sunday. But on Thursday, their bodies were found in the cold, murky waters of the Mill River in an industrial section of New Haven. The 4 of them were found trapped in one of the teenagers' cars. Preliminary autopsy reports show that they drowned. This morning, the first of 4 classmates was put to rest. Laura Lagrateria was only 19. Her grief-stricken family and her many friends who were still in shock came to mourn and pray for Laura, who was described by the priest as a young woman who had a deep love of life.
Laura was a great friend of mine. I knew her since her hair was down to here.
Could have been any of our children. And it's a tragedy. And I think the pain of the waiting was tough on all of us.
For 4 long days until the bodies were found, this community waited in agony, not knowing what had happened to them. The disappearance of the 4 youths led to a nationwide search. The parents offered a $20,000 reward to anyone who had any information that would help them locate their children. Some feared foul play. There were others who held on to the hope that somehow the 4 would turn up alive. But on Thursday, the family's worst fears were confirmed. Police divers found the bodies. The car they were in drove off the Chapel Street Bridge. City officials say a 4,000-pound concrete barrier that would have prevented the car from spilling over had been moved. No one knows who moved it. Police say a case of beer, mostly empty cans, was found in the car. Were they drunk when the accident happened? Results of blood alcohol tests are expected to be released sometime next week. There will be 3 more funerals in the town of Niantic, 1 tomorrow and 2 on Monday. Many of the same faces will be seen at the other funerals. They will be faces of sadness and grief. Reporting in Connecticut, I'm Shahab Sharifi.
Laura Lagrateria. She's one of the 4 teenagers who was killed this week when their car went into the Mill River in New Haven. And as we hear now from Caroline Ivana, it was a day that grief mixed with anger for family and friends of those teenagers.
It is a sadness that the friends and family of 19-year-old Laura Lagrateria find overwhelming. First, she and 3 companions vanished for days, and then word that the 4 drowned. At St. Agnes Roman Catholic Church in Niantic today, a funeral mass for Laura, the first of the 4 to be buried.
It's helpful to her family, I'm sure, to know that Laura was important to you as she was to them, and that you also cared.
About 250 mourners attended today's mass, mostly young people, feeling the loss of a dear friend deeply.
She's a very kind girl, always happy. She miss very dearly.
I didn't know what to think. I thought, you know, that they got abducted or something. Or I'm just glad that the anticipation's over.
While the people who attended today's funeral mass for Laura LaGuarteria were those closest to her, they represented the sentiment of an entire town, shocked by the tragic deaths of 4 young people in a drama that began a week ago today. Last Saturday night, Laura, as well as 19-year-old Jill Sawyer and Christy Stevens and 20-year-old Michael Gallo, went to New Haven for an evening of night clubbing. They were supposed to go to this club, but they never arrived. For days, the families of the 4, all from East Lyme, waited for word on what had happened to them. Thursday, word came. Their tan auto was pulled from the Mill River, their bodies entombed in the car. They had driven off the Chapel Street Bridge in New Haven, a damaged open-ended bridge that was supposed to be sealed. New Haven officials have admitted that 3-foot-high cement barriers that should have sealed off the opening had been moved. In their grief, that fact has friends of the families angered. They say this accident should never have happened.
That problem seems to have been going on for quite some time, and it seems like nothing was really being done about it. That's starting to make a lot of us very angry.
What legal action may be taken on behalf of the families remains to be seen. People aren't thinking about that right now. All they're thinking about is burying 3 more young people and a grief that must be shared by an entire town. In East Lyme, Connecticut, I'm Carol Iavana, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
The car was pulled out of the New Haven Mill River near a bridge that had been closed for repairs. Tests showed the teens had blood alcohol readings ranging from .06 to .11. .10 is the legal limit in Connecticut, and all 4 were below the state's legal drinking age of 21.
The ranges from the blood alcohol measurements compared to their weights and body habitus, as I mentioned, is anywhere from about 1.5 drinks to about 5 drinks.
No physical evidence has as yet been identified to distinguish which one of the 4 was the driver of the vehicle.
Each of the 4 friends had stamps on their hands like those used to mark bar patrons, but so far the stamps are unreadable. Their car plunged through a gap on the bridge where a barrier should have been in place. Today, new barriers were there, flowers placed beneath them. But the bridge was closed as the probe into the accident continues. Word that the 4 teens had been drinking came on the same day that funerals were held for 2 of the victims. Friends and family said goodbye to 19-year-old Jill Sawyer at a church in East Lyme, the victim's hometown. Separate services were held today for 19-year-old Michael Gallo. The other 2 teens, Laura LaGuarteria and Christy Stevens, were buried this past weekend.
But the medical examiner's office says it's still unclear what role alcohol played in that accident. Funerals were held today for Jill Sawyer, Michael Gallo. The other 2 funerals were held over the weekend.
And on the medical examiner's report that says alcohol may have played a role in it.
Tears cut through the crisp New England morning. In the small town of Niantic, this sad scene was repeated for a 3rd time as strong young hands carried the coffin of a contemporary and college girls grieved for one of their own. St. Agnes Church was packed with mourners who came to pay their last respects to Jill Sawyer, a 19-year-old University of Rhode Island student who, along with 3 friends, drove off the abandoned Chapel Street Bridge in New Haven a week ago Saturday after a night of suspected bar hopping.
When one who was part of us is named or lost, it seems really only then that we ask the question, why?
On the same day of this funeral and the 4th and final service tonight, it was revealed all 4 friends had been drinking, and 2 could have been considered legally drunk. Autopsies revealed blood alcohol levels consistent with 2 to 5 drinks. But because it is not known who was driving, investigators cannot determine if drunk driving was the accident's cause.
It will be highly dependent on the background information as to how the accident occurred, physically, how the car fell apart and filled with water and so forth.
Results of drug tests on the victims have not yet been completed, while people here are trying to come to terms with 4 promising young people now dead in a tragedy that could have been prevented. I'm Eric Shawn in Niantic, Connecticut.
Says all of them had been drinking, and 2 could be considered drunk. Authorities still haven't said which one, still haven't identified the driver, or said whether or not he or she was drunk. The funerals for 2 of the victims were held today in
and 2 were legally drunk. Tests on the 4 showed blood alcohol levels either just below or just above the legal limit. The young people's car was pulled out of a New Haven river. Police are still not saying which of the 4 was at the wheel when the car went in. Police are still trying to figure out why a concrete barrier that should have blocked the car's plunge was not in place.